What a champion. Ian's about to head off. Got in much earlier than we thought he might, and he got to actually see some view before darkness fell, and there we go, into it. So if we have a look at a couple of the photos before the lead up, I want to talk about this particular event. So the day before, we went up to the Nut in Stanley. The four of us that were there, Andrew and Kirsten hadn't arrived yet, and Christy and Toby hadn't as well. Vicky, next photo. We went up just to check it out because that was my leg, so I wanted to see what it looked like because I'd be running it at night. It's steeper than it looks. There is a cable car for those that don't like to walk or can't walk. And then the next photo is, I just want to tell you a little story before we get into the message today, which is talking about the aroma of life and salt and light. But these two amazing ladies who are standing here next to their bus with us challenged us to a race when we were coming off the top of the Nut. And they were about to get into a cable car, and obviously they picked up on a little bit of banter that was going on between the three of us who were having a great time. And they got in on that, and they just said, "We'll race you to the bottom." We went, "You're on. We'll flog you." "No, you won't. You won't flog us." Anyway, so Isaac and his brother Sam, who are standing there, Ian's there as well. The three of us ran down. Ian realised that there was a race on, so he continued to run down behind us. And we did beat them. And then we waited for these ladies at the bottom just to rub it in that we beat them because we're super competitive and we needed to beat somebody. And we started this conversation around what we were about to do the next day. There's 101 Ks. They weren't aware of that because they were tourists from New South Wales. And we were just sharing that, and they were intrigued that we would do something like that. And then they found out that we were actually doing it to raise money for the work of schools and the work of working with youth in values education, and they were excited. We had this conversation literally for about 20 metres where they talked about how one of the ladies, her brother, had lost everything in the fires in New South Wales. They were talking about how their communities were struggling with all of that. We were talking about how we dealt with the floods. We just had this conversation between here and there, and they just wanted to be a part of what we were doing. And they said, we're going to give some money. And they went and they found some money. And no, this isn't enough, they said. And they went back into their bus and they got some more. And at the end of the day, they pulled out $30 towards this cause of $11,500, which we ended up raising, which is significant, especially considering we found out it was their ice cream money. And it's like, oh my goodness, we can't do that. No. And then they just pulled their credit card out and they went up and still got their ice cream. And I think that's significant because they were so excited to be a part of something bigger. And they were attracted to that something bigger somehow. And it started with the attraction of seeing community happen on the top of the Nut as three of us were just enjoying each other's company and having a great day out. There's an aroma around those sort of experiences, isn't there? There's something that's attractive, that attracts people's attention. And we certainly saw that tangibly that day. There is an aroma around purpose. There is an aroma around joy. I want to share with you a very well-known scripture about salt and light. And if we get straight into that, it's from Matthew chapter 5. And it says this: "You are the salt of the what? But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world, a town on a hill that cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it where? On its stand, where it belongs. And it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." Salt brings enhancement to flavour. Have you ever had potato chips, hot potato chips that needed salt? Oh my goodness. They're just oily until we add the salty goodness, and then they're oily, salty goodness, yes? They're almost unpalatable without salt. And there is something about salt and light that brings that flavour enhancement and brings the X factor to things the way that they were meant to be. But the thing as I reflect on this is that there needs to be an appropriate amount of salt. Can we over-saltify? That's my new word. Can we put too much salt on something? Can we put not enough salt on something? What happens when you put too much salt on something? You can't take it back, you've got to start again, am I right? You really can't fix it. In the same way, and I think about in the morning when we ran the nut and we started before the nut is that big rock thing at Stanley. When I started off on that race and it was pre-dawn and we ran up that ridiculous hill and I was gasping for air by the top and seeing people pass me, and we got to the top, all of a sudden there were these migratory birds that nest on the top of the nut and live most of the year in the ocean all the way up to the Arctic. They live on the ocean, and we were stepping on these birds because they were freaking out at the headlamps that were coming through their habitat and going from one side to the other. Freaking us out because none of us wanted to do an injury within half an hour of a massive race. But these poor birds were spooked by the light. Have you ever had somebody shine a torch in your eyes when the torch should have been shone somewhere else so that you could see where you were going? The appropriate use of salt and light is something that we need to take in its context. In the same way, great coffee can taste like rubbish. I put a fresh batch, absolutely straight, fresh out of the bag this morning. And I can start with barista-grade milk and the best product that I've got, but I can completely destroy it if I don't know what to do with it. Who's ever had a terrible coffee? Oh my goodness. Yeah. No. Right answer. Now I wonder, I'm going to make 2 coffees for you. Okay, so I wonder, who'd like a coffee? Yeah? Tash? Do you have sugar? 1 sugar? All right, it's full cream milk though, is that okay? And I'm going to give another one away. So I wonder, and again it's full cream milk, so who'd like the other one? All right, Christy, straight in front. Any sugar in you? Okay, so I'm just going to do this while we chat. And the really important thing to know with coffee is there is a pattern. And it's really important that we get the grind right. You can start with perfect coffee and you can destroy it if you don't have the grind right. If the grind is too coarse, it will be sour and disgusting and it will be like your milk has gone off. And if it's too fine, it will take too long for the water to go through, so it picks up all of the impurities and the smokiness of the burning process of the coffee beans, and then it just becomes something that is completely not what it was meant to be. And the perfect coffee is expressed within 25 to 30 seconds with 25 to 30 ml of coffee shot. That is the science of coffee. And once you've got that right, it is a bit like getting your... Oh, look at that. That sounds good. It looks good. And I know. And Natty, can I get a jug to steam the milk too? That would be awesome. We'll get that done in a minute. This coffee will be right. And I can still destroy it if I kill the milk and if I overcook the milk. And if I get the milk right to 65 degrees, then that milk will be perfect within its range of extracting the sugars within the milk out, so it becomes something that's not just creamy, it's smooth, it's sweet, and it's creamy. Can you see that I'm passionate about what I do? And I teach this, and I do this because I believe that in giving somebody something that they are looking for and giving them something that is of value and that's something that is going to add value to them, that I am indeed doing something to the glory of God. Because they are looking forward to something that I'm able to deliver, and they get to go, yes, yes, and yes. There's 2 people who are about to say that. All right. Now I'm going to let this do what it does. It takes a little while because this is my little machine, and this is what we started with before we got the coffee cart all set up. So I'll just let that do its little thing for like 5 minutes because that's how long it takes. But the reason I wanted to do that is There is something about the coffee bean, a bit like the value adding that light and salt do in the world. Sorry, Fee, and those online. I might do a bit of wandering today. Hello, by the way, and hello, everybody. There is something about the value adding that we can do into people's lives, just like making a good coffee or cooking a steak well or whatever it is, that we do things to value add to people that literally brings that X factor. Yes? If we don't pay attention, people know that. If we're not paying attention to the needs of our kids, they know that. Honey, when I'm not listening and you say, you're not even listening, and I go, true, can you start from the beginning? At least I've learned to be honest, because there's no point trying to fluff around that, because she already knows I wasn't listening the whole way through. By the way, happy anniversary, 23 years today. And there it is. One of the things that I do in training young people, and anybody here who would like to be trained, is make sure that if you aren't happy with the product, you just throw it out. Hence, there is a lot of waste when it comes to doing things well for people, but it's worth it because I would rather you wait for something that was what you were looking for than to rush something and you regret it. Tash, would you like to come and get this? That should look nice and shiny. No, I didn't. It's a half love heart. If it was Wendy, I would have done a whole love heart, but yeah, it's like a wave. Christy, would you like to come and grab this? It's a little bit half mast, but I think you'd like a strong coffee this morning. I am shaking. Always shake. There is an aroma that comes off, or not enough. There is an aroma that comes from fresh coffee, for those of you who like coffee, that brings a smile to your face, am I right? And there are people that I know that don't like coffee, that like to walk past a coffee shop because the aroma does something for their soul. There's also people that I know that hate the smell of coffee and will avoid it like the plague. That's why Terry's sitting at the back today. And that's okay. But being a coffee man, I'm going to serve those who love coffee, and I'm going to honour those who don't. Does that make sense? Yep. I'm going to value add, and I'm going to do whatever it is to do that within context. The thing that I think that is the most important thing for us to understand is this, is that in finding our purpose in life, we bring an aroma that is extra special. When we find what it is that makes us thrive, when we find what it is that we get excited about. Did you pick up in my just little tiny conversation with you about coffee that I'm passionate about making good coffee? Anybody? And it's something that I've found, like standing behind a barbecue, that is a catalyst for conversation that makes me feel comfortable and makes the person feel comfortable on the other side, because there is a degree of safety between us and there is a shared experience. I think coffee culture is thriving in our nation, not only because Australia does great coffee, but because we are a nation of people who like to have that safety factor. We want a reason to come together, and that sometimes the barriers come down when we do that, when you just go, let me tell you about my week. There's a disarming nature about aromatic stuff, am I right? And yet, sometimes, the intention of aromas, even in our own house, I come in and go, ooh, what's that aroma? And it just smells like a aroma that goes in the toilet. Yes? So we can come again with the right intention, but aromas we attach place and purpose and meaning and history and whatever to. So for me, coffee. So important, by the way. I can make you a coffee later if you missed out. I love watching my dad. And he has an aroma about him. He is the most remarkable pastoral care bloke. Dad, if you're watching, which is really unlikely. And anybody who knows my dad, tell him that I talked about him and I said something positive. Because we fight all the time. We are so chalk and cheese. But there is an aroma about this man. In his retirement in particular, where he does things that he's passionate about and draws attention to himself. And he hates attention, but he draws attention to himself because he thrives behind a barbecue making pancakes for kids. And he loves hanging out with his son, so I love inviting him because he usually says yes. And we make pancakes and I get to do what I do, and he's in the background making them, and he thrives because he doesn't have to pack up or clean up. He just leaves and leaves it to me. But he's in his zone. He thrives in that men's shed there at the Church of Christ on at Vincent, because now he's got time to go and hang out with blokes doing that. And now he's serving the Vincent School community as they send their year sixes over to do woodwork work in the men's shed. And he loves that. He's got time for that. He thrives. He's a peddler of greens in his street. Yes, he grows spinach. And he walks down the street with his bags of spinach, and he has chats with people down his street, and he knows everybody in his street. He thrives and he brings an aroma with him because he is doing something that he's passionate about. He draws out a conversation with people and can actually care for people. He is an introvert like me, but loves people. When we find our purpose, we carry an aroma. When we find our purpose, it's like salt and light in right doses that do something about bringing added flavour and enhancement to the world around us. And I want to encourage you with that today, because I know that I spent many years feeling, and still it's part of my general disposition to think negatively about myself, but to think that I couldn't find my value and couldn't find my purpose and couldn't find my meaning when people were talking about the need for that. And yet it required a journey of trial and error and working hard to find the things that I was passionate about and the things that just tended to end up coming naturally for me. Does it make sense? For some of you, you'll understand that because you're on that journey, or you're at the end of that journey and that's continuing. For some of you, you're starting that journey. And can I encourage you just to continue in that? Just continue to try to do things. And go back if you missed last week's message from John that was a cracker on the daily grind and doing things for the Lord and finding the purpose in that, because that in itself is the very essence of what we're talking about. Talking about that, let's go to that passage that John really focused on last week from Colossians. Paul's letter to the Colossians, let's get that one up there. Slaves, obey your earthly masters in everything. It feels like a slave sometimes. Yeah, oh my goodness, what a grind. And do it not only when their eye is on you and to curry their flavour, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Next. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not human masters. And then it says what? Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Oh my goodness. Vicky, can you go back just to that middle part of that scripture? Whatever you do, work at it with your heart as if working for the Lord. Years ago, now I've been working in full-time ministry for 21 years in some capacity or another. And I had a very clear call from God that said, you will work in full-time ministry. Being someone who grew up in a missionary family, and my grandparents, missionaries in PNG, and a faith that sort of invaded everything, I just assumed that was pastoring a church, of which we did. And we planted a church and we served wholeheartedly as senior pastors for 18 or so years. And yet that was just a season. I work, and when I heard that calling of God, and the word was literally that he was calling me into full-time ministry, I just went, that's what we're all called into. Does that relate to anybody here? If you've been walking with God a while, in essence, it's this whole essence of whatever you do, do it for the Lord. As if you're doing it for God. As an engineer, when I got this calling, it was just like, I can do this in my engineering workplace, even though I hate it. But God, if that's what you want me to do, I will do it here. Thank God it wasn't that. But then in hindsight, there's so many things over the period of growth in life over the years that oh my goodness, I wouldn't have it any other way, but they were hard when they were hard and when the season was the way it was. It was just a growing up and an experiencing of the fullness of the love of God and the shedding of the things that held me back from receiving all that he had for me. So now as in full-time ministry, that means that I'm working with 1,000+ kids a week. In fact, it's getting bigger and bigger as I get to serve other schools and come in as a experienced chaplain and serve them as well. But the one thing that has always resonated for us has been this idea of whatever we do it as if we're doing it for the Lord. And this wasn't even until I heard John speak on this passage last week. It was like, it's always been our life passage, but I've never put the passage together with our life. Does that make sense? It's like God just went, that's exactly what I called you to. That's exactly the verse that I was speaking over your life. Whatever you do, full-time ministry is that you would do it as if you were doing it for me. So every time we do whatever we do in our school environments, in our community environments, in our church environment, whether it's setting up the coffee cart or whatever, we've always done it with an attitude of how can we serve our God in a way in which we can build relationships and life and capacity in the people around us. That's why I'm so excited about this vital program that we've just raised $11,500 for. The 3 chaplains who are going to go and do that training in April, the 6 schools that are going to be impacted by it, because I've been running this program, which is a kingdom values program without the name of God written all over it, which means I can run it in a secular system and people can get attracted to it because it has the aroma of the kingdom of God over it. And people can get attracted to what's going on because it works and because it changes lives and because lives are set free and because they don't realize yet it's because Jesus is speaking words of life all over them through a vessel like me and others that are doing that. They can be disarmed because they don't have the systems that are in place that they're already at odds with, but they've got relationship with people who are bringing life and speaking life and drawing life out of them. Do you know anybody who holds you back because they see you as a Christian and thinks that there's a whole lot of baggage associated with that and so they hold you back? Anybody? Yeah. And even worse, if we think that success is to get people to come to church rather than success is to love one another. There is an aroma that comes out of the very values of living the principles of the kingdom of God. The things that work, the grind that's set so that espresso shot comes through in 25 to 30 seconds and is that sweet, sweet taste that doesn't leave an aftertaste, that lingers, that you need to flush away. Sometimes we get it wrong, yes? Sometimes our lives are not an act of worship and we get it wrong, and we need to walk in humility with God in that and with the people that we care about because we get it wrong, because we grow up, but our God is bigger than that. When I was at uni and things were getting really tough, I did engineering at university. I alluded to the fact before that I'm an engineer. By the time I got to the end, I needed every little bit of hope that I could get. I tried Mozart in the background because I heard that sort of music would be helpful. I hate that sort of music. But it was like, I will do anything. Sorry, Steve, if that's your music. But it was just like, man, I was just like, I'm a music person and I get distracted by silence. So I always studied with music, and the only way I got through uni was to buy a new CD every 2 weeks because that's how much money I had left. So whether that was AC/DC or, don't judge me, or Jimmy Barnes or whatever, I just needed new music all the time. That's how I got through. And then I tried the classics because apparently that was going to help me when I was super stressed in my final year of uni. It didn't help. But one of the things that I learned as I was trying to deal with the stress was also this idea of conditioning and the aromas that go with that, to create an environment where there is a familiar aroma around even your studies. Anybody ever heard of these sort of things where it's just like you've got an aroma that you are doing things in, and then when you're about to go into a stressful environment and you're trying to recall things, you get a whiff of that same aroma and it's like it sparks your whatever. Just like every time I walk under the JCU Uni Club and that stale smell of beer reminds me of university, it's actually a positive thing because it was the route that I took every day to get to the engineering campus. It actually makes me smile because there's some great memories, not in the club itself, but on the uni campus with the people that I went there. The JCU, talking about JCU, the library's the same thing. It's huge. Anyone been there? JCU library, it's got this unique aroma about it that just brings back 25 years ago. There's something about aroma that brings things out that can be positive and can be negative. And when I looked at what aroma really is, because I thought, man, is it really, am I on the right track? And I looked at the meaning of aroma. Part of the meaning of aroma is a pervasive change of quality. Something that brings about a pervasive change of quality. And I thought, that is exactly what this is about. This is about doing things in such a way that ooze into the life of the area and the people that we care about, that brings about a change of quality. How do I know that this works? Because when times are tough in my schools and Dan comes in as a happy chappy and goes, "Good morning," I've got people and staff members who, when they are super stressed, go, I was going to try and mute this, but I can't do that. Actually, I can. Look, here we go. Oh my goodness, how can you be so happy all the time? And I go, oh, okay, you're having a hard time. But that oozes out because that's a part of, not because I'm doing well all the time, but because I love doing what I do. I hung out with a fellow teacher yesterday who's about to have a baby for the first time, and he invited me over and we spent some time yesterday and we hung out and we were just chatting about stuff. And he said, as somebody who works in high-level sporting environments within the city, a lot of people see him wear his Thurgow shirt and go, "Oh my goodness, do you work there? Like, what's that like?" And he goes, "I love it." Because he has a sense of purpose and value about what he does. And he has turned our school around, and we are award winners in girls rugby union, and he's got a passion about rugby union, and he carries that. And so he's got a sense of purpose that carries an aroma about it, so that no matter how negative people are around him, he has the sense of going, "What are you talking about? I love my school. I love my work. I love what I do." And again, go back to what John talked about last week. When we do it as if we're doing it for the Lord, for those of you who are following Jesus, it is exactly that even though we don't understand, if we go, "Man, I'm going to do this with the best attitude I can," we carry an aroma that transforms lives. Even when we don't understand why things are the way that they are, we understand that there is a God who loves us and cares about us. And for those of you who are following Jesus and who understand that you are being transformed from the inside out by the power of his Spirit, Paul writes that the fruit of the Spirit is love, it's joy, it's peace, it's patience, it's kindness, it's goodness, it's gentleness, it's self-control. Did I miss any? How good is that? And did you know, as I think about that if I'm to partake of a fruit, that it has no flavour unless there's an aroma. If I block my nose, it tastes completely different or has no taste at all. We are meant to carry out our lives in such a way that we bring love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control into the world around us, as an aroma and as something that is good to eat, so that people can taste and see that the Lord is good. And they can taste it because there's an aroma that goes with the actions that we bring. Yes? What we do brings an aroma, and they can taste and see that the Lord is good. How can people taste and see that the Lord is good without the aroma of God? Through the people of God who are being transformed into his likeness. And how can we carry out and have this fruit of the Spirit that invades our culture and our world unless we are attached to the person of Jesus. And no matter where you're at in this room today, and no matter where you're at online, that's the answer. Life change happens by hanging out with Jesus, even if you don't understand what that means yet. Even if that means you just start picking up one of the Gospels and saying, hey, I'm going to start and I just want to read about him. I want to find out what Jesus did. Can I guarantee you it will change your world? And can I guarantee you that there will be an aroma that begins to take place around your life that people take notice of before you even realize that it's there? Because you will start to find that you are more peaceful. You'll start to find in the midst of trials and situations and ebbs and flows and highs and lows that you are more loving, that you are more patient. Even 5% makes a big difference to the people around you who would notice the difference. Would you agree? And kind and gentle. Oh my goodness, a bit more self-control. Do you believe it? That's my question to you today. Do you believe that your life has an aroma? Do you believe that no matter where you're at, that you can make a difference? That if you're following Jesus, that you can attract people to the goodness of God, that people can actually taste and see that God is good just because you hang out with Jesus. But for those of you who aren't ready for that yet and who are wondering about walking with Jesus, do you believe that if you are more peaceful, if you are more patient, if you are more kind, if you are more loving, if you're more gentle, if you've got greater self-control, that you can change the dynamics of the world in which you live and work and the relationships that you have? What do you guys think? Does it make a difference? And I can guarantee you that as you walk with Jesus, he is the one who gives us what we need to get through that. As the band comes up, I want to close with an invitation, because in essence that is the invitation. The invitation is to life and life in abundance. Whether you are walking with God or whether you aren't sure what that looks like yet. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Vicky, can we get that up? Is Vicky up there? Yeah, there she is. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out? Let's get that slide up there. On what? On religion, on the box, on the system, on the process. Come to me, Jesus says. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't let anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Do you want a life that has a pervasive characteristic aroma, leaving a mark on the world around you? Not an odor, an aroma. Something that makes a difference. Do you want to have an aroma that in loving and caring for the people around you and bringing the essence of the goodness of God and the fruit of Spirit around you, that when they might finally make a decision to step foot into the environment like a church, that they go, oh my goodness, there are other people just like you? That they find out that the very aroma that they were attracted to was the aroma of Christ at work within your life. It wasn't just your goodness, it was the goodness of God. It was the very things that he can manufacture. The good stuff, the pattern, the way that it works. It's the fruit of being close, of coming close, of transformation by Jesus. To be set free, to be forgiven, to become whole. So I want to invite you to stand, and I'd like to pray for you. And then we're going to close with this song. I want to ask you if you want to make a decision to step one step closer to Jesus. If you recognize that the fruit on your life is not necessarily the aromatic that draws people to the goodness and the awesomeness of Jesus, I want to invite you just to spend this time just saying, hey, Jesus, that's me. I just want to take one step closer to you. Are you willing to take that step? One closer to Jesus. For those of you walking with him, one more step with him. Father, thank you. Thank you that you came that we would have life and life in abundance. If we are not walking in that abundance of life right now, God, I pray that you would raise up a faith within us that says, I am ready for the next step, whatever it is. Lord, that we would take one step closer to you, that your aroma would transform us, and in doing so, our lives would be transformed so that we transform the world around us. God, I pray over each and every person here right now that we would get the experience in 2020 where somebody comes to us and says, oh my goodness, thank you. And we get to say, what for? And they get to talk about the very things that they saw in our lives, and we go, God, thank you, that had to be you. So transform us so that you might transform others. In Jesus' name.